Russia, which invaded Ukraine in February 2022, said it would take a week to win the war, but little progress has been made a year later. Let us try to figure out why. Hello. I am Time to Hakuna Matata. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine have gradually risen since the conflict in the East Boss region in 2014, and Russia eventually invaded Ukraine in February 2022. The war appeared to be over in a matter of days, with Russia winning. However, contrary to popular belief, the Russian army is unable to end the war quickly and is instead mired in a counterattack. Military experts suggest dozens of reasons, but they can be broadly classified as internal and external to Russia. First, there are three external reasons for the Russian military. 1. Western countries' high-intensity economic sanctions against Russia. 2. State-of-the-art weapons support for Ukraine. And 3. Transfer of classified military information to the Russian military. Among them, Western countries' economic sanctions against Russia are difficult to understand unless you are a dizzying economic expert due to the accumulation of various regulatory policies since the beginning of the war. The event that had the greatest impact on the front lines, however, was when Western countries stopped exporting precision parts to Russia. Precision parts such as semiconductors, radars, and main engines are so important in modern warfare, where the level of equipment determines the outcome of a battle, that it is difficult to find a weapon that does not use them. Until this point, Russia had been importing these equipments from major Western countries, but trade was cut off immediately after the invasion of Ukraine, and they had to be replaced with domestic equipment. However, Russia's precision parts were far behind in technology, and production was limited, so as the war dragged on, Russia suffered a crisis in the quality and production of advanced weapons. Of course, precision parts from China were imported, but the quantity was small, leaving the Russian military with outdated equipment. As an example, consider the changes that occurred after ASML, a Dutch semiconductor company, stopped exporting to Russia. It was intended to develop a device for the production of a new tank. However, after the war, semiconductor supplies were cut off, and the latest tank that Russia was so proud of was invisible throughout the war, with production so low that it first appeared in October of last year. As a result, the majority of Russian army tanks are still outdated, and Western economic sanctions have severely hampered Russia's ability to produce advanced weapons. Western countries, on the other hand, have been a huge help in strengthening the Ukrainian military's defense capabilities. Ukraine has recently received a large amount of weapons, and as a result, the use of obsolete weapons by the Russian army has been greatly reduced. Anti-tank weapons known as Russian tank hunters and Western weapons capable of destroying ammunition magazines, in particular, are so well known that no further discussion is required. Can the war, by the way, be won immediately with only the most recent weapons? Not at all. As history has shown, one of the most important factors determining victory or defeat in war is information. As a result, Western countries are assisting Ukraine in defending itself by providing critical military information about the Russian military. Since the beginning of the war, the US has launched large reconnaissance planes with a detection range of 375 kilometers over Ukraine's neighboring forces, including Poland and Romania. Russian troops' locations and movement routes were tracked in real time. Of course, the US always denies that the information obtained in this manner is passed on to the Ukrainian military, but if you look at the Ukrainian military's rapid and accurate strikes, it is very likely that there is information transmission from the US in the background. To summarize, Russia is still using a lot of outdated equipment due to problems with precision parts production or quality due to Western sanctions, but Ukraine uses military information provided by Western countries and state-of-the-art weapons supported by Western countries to make a significant difference to the Russian military. However, these external factors alone do not adequately explain the Russian military situation. No matter how old the production period, the Russian army's arsenal of cutting-edge weapons dwarfs that of the Ukrainian army. Furthermore, Russia is one of the few countries that not only outnumbers Ukraine in population and resources, but also has nuclear weapons. It is difficult to accept the argument that Russia's sluggish performance is solely due to the West's response, but if that is the case, the core of Russia's military problems will eventually have to be viewed as internal. As a result, this time we will look more closely at the Russian army's supply, tactics, and troop problems. The Russian military's biggest problem in the early stages of the war was a lack of consistent supply, and the main cause was the serious corruption that existed in Russian society even before the war. Corruption was so severe in all aspects of society that Russia was ranked 129th out of 180 countries in Transparency International's 2020 Corruption Perceptions Index by country. The military, a more closed organization, was even worse within Russia. Because the paths of intertwined corruption among military generals, military technical institutes, and manufacturers were already well established, Russia's high-tech weapons were of dubious quality. It had to be that way. Furthermore, the basic equipment provided to soldiers differed from training materials, and the supply status was unknown. Aside from these corruption issues, another reason why it is inevitably susceptible to spread is organization. Because of the nature of the Russian military, which overlooked the importance of support, the number of armored and mechanized equipment operating at the forefront was the highest in the world, but the number of transport vehicles and drivers to support the operation was far insufficient. Of course, when the Russian army is dealing with forces on very small and narrow terrain, such as in Syria or South Ossetia, this issue is not well revealed. For starters, there were almost no large-scale battles, and supply was limited to tens of kilometers. But Ukraine was a different story. Russian military support was initially insufficient to deliver ammunition, fuel, and food to the right place every day for hundreds of thousands of troops, tanks, and armored vehicles in a country larger than France, the largest country in Western Europe. In the end, the Russian army was held back by two chronic issues: corruption and insufficient supply capacity. Because the figures in the document differed from reality, the command was unable to accurately assess the current state of equipment on the front lines, and the Russian army's supply operation was hampered. It was done in a very inefficient manner. Furthermore, because the Russian army's supply capacity was lacking from the start, the amount of military supplies supplied to frontline soldiers decreased rapidly as the supply period increased. These supply issues eventually became so severe that the Russians were unable to launch further attacks, and the Russians' plans for action were severely disrupted. By the way, the Russian military probably did not anticipate these issues at all, especially given the lack of support power revealed by the formation. Nonetheless, there was a corner to believe that it went to war as it is without strengthening support forces. And the background can be seen in the Russian army's battalion tactical team system. To put it simply, a battalion tactical team is a system in which almost all units required for an attack, such as armored vehicles, tanks, self-propelled artillery, rocket artillery, and infantry, are deployed very gradually within one battalion. It differs greatly from most countries, which have only infantry units and general infantry battalions and no independent armored or artillery units. The advantage of this battalion tactical team system is that a sufficiently meaningful attack can be carried out with just one battalion without the need for a separate support force, and units can be moved quickly because the entire division does not have to move at the same time. Of course, it is disadvantageous for long-term defensive operations, but the advantage of being able to quickly end the war so that there is no defense to begin with was an appealing factor for the Russian military. As a result, the Russian military took advantage of the advantages of the battalion tactical team system, and troops divided into battalions quickly took control of Ukraine's main railways, and the Russian military then planned to solve the shortage of field transport vehicles through rail transport and end the war quickly. However, when war broke out, Ukrainian forces reacted quickly, and resistance was especially fierce at railway junctions. Finally, the Russian military's plan to seize Ukraine's main railways was thwarted in the first phase, and it hurriedly bypassed major cities and went deep into Ukrainian territory. As the Russian army advanced along the roads around it, unable to occupy the main railway, the number of supply vehicles increased rapidly, and the longer supply lines could no longer cope. Finally, the Russian army was unable to continue its attack due to a lack of supplies. Furthermore, Ukrainian forces discovered weak Russian defenses and launched a massive counterattack, forcing the Russian force, which was only a few battalions strong, to retreat. To summarize, Russia's tactical issues, combined with existing supply issues, precipitated a major crisis at an early stage, while also forming a thin front in many places and allowing Ukraine to counterattack. As a result, various supply and tactical issues frustrated the Russian military's plans from the start of the war, and together with the support of Western countries, had a decisive effect and became the backdrop for Ukraine's survival. And there is one more issue that Russia has not been able to resolve: a lack of military forces. All troops were mobilized as soon as the war began. Russia, unlike Ukraine, did not take any action until mid-September 2022. Of course, at the start of the war, the Russian army's loss of manpower was not severe, so this situation was not unique. Furthermore, manpower is required to command and manage the occupied territories of Ukrainian territory, but because Russia has only implemented a harsh control policy rather than a mild civil operation, residents' resistance has increased, and the number of troops required to manage the occupied territories continues to rise. As these Russian forces ran out of troops to deploy on the front lines, the Russian defense line gradually weakened and had to yield to a counterattack by the Ukrainian army last fall. Meanwhile, after the Russian army's lack of troops was revealed, Putin declared partial mobilization and deployed hundreds of thousands of reservists to Ukraine's front lines. It is unclear what choice Russia will make in the face of Western sanctions and support for Ukraine. Furthermore, the official participation of Belarusian forces is becoming increasingly likely, making the Ukrainian war unpredictable. However, Time to Hakuna Matata will do its best to provide viewers with information that is as accurate and timely as possible, without missing any changes. Please subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.